Let's begin by meeting Mr. Vignarajah's supporters. We have former Chief Judge of Baltimore City, Wanda Hurd, longtime civil rights leader Marvin Doc Cheatham, former 5th District Council member Ricky Spector, former federal prosecutor Charlie Sheeler, and former Baltimore City police officer and FOP leader Robert Cherry.
That's right.
No tourism dollars are flowing into this city that I know you love dearly. Can you talk to us about that and why you believe Mr. Vignarajah is the person who can fix these problems that we're clearly facing now and will face in the future?
Well, first of all, I think what the virus has brought about is the clear disparity in the health care that's provided for African Americans. We're seeing it not only in Baltimore, but in Louisiana, New York, and other places where African Americans are dying at a disproportionate rate as a result of this virus. Baltimore is no different than the other places in the nation. What we also are seeing is a difference between each state in how the leaders, the political leaders, are handling the virus and the outcomes. And I don't think there can be any question that leadership makes a difference. If you look at what is happening here in Maryland, no one can doubt that Governor Hogan is doing a phenomenal job at keeping us safe here in Maryland. And he is impacting Baltimore City as well. He's including it because it is part of the state of Maryland. And to the extent that he is focusing on what is clearly a problem in our community that has been neglected, I think that part of the problem is that it is showing clearly that African Americans in Baltimore City are going to be disproportionately affected in health care. We need a leader that leads Baltimore in a way that the mayor should, just like our governor is leading the other governors around the country in ensuring safety. As I look at the years I've lived in Baltimore and raised my daughter, I can clearly see that there are times when we just haven't had the leadership. And most importantly, in the last 15 years or more, we just haven't had that kind of leadership. And so I think Theroux has the plan to fix the problem, and he's been on the street trying to address the disparity. Even though it's a political year, he's got great ideas and he's focused on helping our community.
He's been obviously, as you know, Judge Hurd, at most of our town halls. I think it was one he had a conflict of interest and he couldn't attend it. What is it about his plan that you believe will work for the city of Baltimore? What is it that you believe Mr. Vignarajah will be able to do that others have not been able to do, Judge Hurd?
Well, first and foremost, any of the problems that we have in the city cannot be done individually. It can't be done by ordering or demanding that one segment of the community fix the problem. It takes a collaboration. It takes a collaboration of healthcare providers. It takes a collaboration of public health. We have some of the best hospitals in the world located in Baltimore City. In fact, Governor Hogan is using their technique and their ability to help solve some of what may solve the nation's problems. But for Baltimore, they need to be solved. There are lists of people that are dying. The hot spots include areas of this city where we ought to have testing. And Theroux has been talking about ensuring that testing occurs in Baltimore City. In areas of this city, like Pimlico, like the 21215, like 21229, which is where I live, to ensure that testing is done of anyone 50 years or older, whether or not they have a doctor's referral. And why is that important? Well, it is our community that is dying. We need to know where the hot spots are. We need to trace and track where the illness is popping up so we can address it, so it can be the focus of our attention in order to ensure that we reduce the percentages of African Americans dying. That's one of the ideas he has. One of the other ideas he has is to ensure that while this pandemic is going on, that our schools don't continue to fall behind. Our kids, this is bringing out the fact that our kids aren't able to sign on. We are not a community where we have Wi-Fi available for every student, and every student has a laptop. There are people in this city that have to decide whether or not to feed their family or let the bill for the Wi-Fi be paid. And we shouldn't have that as a problem. So yes, I apologize. He has quite a number of things on his plan.
Right. No apologies necessary. We want to ask you a number of questions and give you opportunities, you and the other guests tonight, an opportunity to respond. Look, you were on the front lines dealing with issues like this in criminal court. We know Mr. Vignaraj's resume.
Oh, yes.
He was a former Deputy State Attorney General, also in the federal prosecutor's office as well. That in mind, he's talked a lot about law and order, which Baltimoreans overwhelmingly through surveys are telling Fox 45 that they want public safety. We understand that. But if you don't change the condition of the people living in the city, what's going to change in general? Because asking people to live peacefully in poverty just doesn't make any sense. People need their lives changed profoundly, and that's not happening and hasn't happened for decades in the city.
First of all, Theroux's plan does not assume that you can just send the police in, arrest everyone, and solve the problem. That is not his plan. And I really am concerned at how some of his opponents are misleading the public, because his plan demands that there be a collaboration. It includes the use of not only community, but it's called community empowerment. It is called community engagement. That's how the police learns to work with the community to improve what's going on. But don't leave out the churches, and don't leave out the business community, and don't leave out the schools. All of them have to work together to improve what's going on in our community and reduce crime. That is what his plan is about, a collaboration. And see, what we've been looking for in the past is for the police to swoop in and do it to us. It doesn't work that way. If you have drug treatment providers in a neighborhood where you have a real drug problem, then you have the potential of addressing what may be causing part of your crime there. But if you don't have the accessibility of drug treatment for those people who are addicted, then they're going to be addicted and they may go out and commit crimes.
Judge Hurd.
If you have people that don't have jobs, they need to have jobs in order to support their families and not be involved in crime.
Can I go back to something you said a moment ago? You said this can't be a demand that one segment of the community fix a problem. And I want you to be clear about what you're saying here, because there are people who believe that this is boiling down to a very racial divide in the city, that the crime issue is a black problem in the city of Baltimore. And it seems at times that we're dancing around the discussion about that. Is that how you feel? And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Are you saying, though, that we can't simply label this as a black-white problem? Because I think there are people who feel that way.
It is not a black and white problem. It's a Baltimore problem. It's affecting all of us, all segments of our community. And I'm not talking about just the black community or the Jewish community. I'm talking about the poor community. I live in a neighborhood that's very nice. I live in West Baltimore, and my house has been broken into. I've been a victim of crime. I have a child that I've raised in this city, and she's now an adult, but I would like her to want to live in Baltimore City. I am telling you, this is a Baltimore problem, and it's not new. This didn't start with Freddie Gray. This goes back before Freddie Gray. We had been having crime problems in the city because we weren't working together as a team, whites and blacks, Jewish and Gentile, to improve Baltimore City for everyone. Theroux's plan does just that. He encourages this collaborative effort, and that's what some of the other folks are missing. This isn't a black-white problem. This is a us problem. It's like coronavirus. It's not a black-white problem. It's a us problem. Every person in this city has the right to live in a safe community, to send their kids to a decent school, to be able to raise their family, go to church, and live in a community where everyone is equally supported. That you have the ability, if you're sick, to get care. If you have a drug problem, that you can get drug treatment. And see, that's the difference between the other plans that I hear, or the people that are talking about having a meeting to make a plan, because Thuroo has a plan, and he has the leadership ability and the intellect and people around him to carry out the plan. And I'll tell you, I've not supported anyone publicly like this. First, I couldn't because I was a judge.
We understand.
But now that I can, I love this city too much to remain silent and not speak up. And I'm sick and tired of people picking on people who want to step forward, put their lives and their careers aside to dedicate themselves to the city, only to be picked on because they don't look like the regular crew that used to be running the city. Well, just look at what we've got. Look what we've got right now. It's time. Open your eyes. It's time.
Okay, Judge
for Thuroo.
Let me ask you. Fair enough. Thank you. As you know, last fall, Mr. Vignaraja was stopped late one night in the city of Baltimore, during which time, in that traffic stop, and it's on video, he asked the officer to turn off their body-worn cameras so he could have a discussion. Now, Mr. Vignaraja is a former prosecutor in the state and federal side. He's worked with officers. He knows the difficulty of their job. These officers involved went under investigation for what they did because of that request and because of them complying with his request.
That's right.
Should voters in this instant support him after that particular traffic stop and his request for them to turn off the body-worn cameras? Because to the person watching that, it looked as though he had something to hide, and it didn't look ethical in that particular instance.
Well, first of all, Kai, I looked at that whole tape, and I want to first tell you that he did not initially ask for the body-worn camera to be turned off. He initially asked, was it on? He wanted it on. Once the business of the police was done, then he asked whether or not they could turn it off. Everything was done. He was finished. The other thing that I think is really important is he was in a neighborhood where many of us, including me, can call it driving while black. I live in West Baltimore, and I'm going to tell you, I drive a really nice car, and I get pulled over. And I don't tell anybody I'm a judge. I don't tell them anything. I just follow the instructions, put my hands on the steering wheel, pull out my driver's license. If you want to say that because someone gets stopped in Baltimore City because you're African American driving in a neighborhood where you think you shouldn't be as a reason for not electing someone mayor, I will just tell you, I will ask you, if you're a grown up in Baltimore City, have you ever been stopped? And I will tell you, I'm one of them. In fact, I got stopped on my own street recently. Why? It was after midnight. And I guess I wasn't supposed to be driving my really nice retirement car that I gave myself. I also talked to the woman who was in the car with him. And I questioned him and her. And she not only told me, she's a lawyer from D.C., but she told me about her Uber receipt, because when the business was over, she asked the police officer if she could leave. He said yes. They called her an Uber, and she has her Uber receipt. This is what I'm talking about. You have good people trying to be mayor, and I'm telling you that Thuroo is one of those good people. And for people to just destroy him or attempt to destroy his reputation on untruths is really disgraceful, and they should be ashamed of themselves. And anybody that knows me knows that if I didn't think he was above board, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about him in the way that I do.
Well, Judge Hurd, let's bring our researcher into the conversation as well, Julian Barron, because he has some questions for you as well. Julian?
Judge Hurd, we of course know that you have a lot of experience in the law and prosecuting the law, being a former judge and a former chief judge. And so we've read Mr. Vigneraj's crime plan in detail, and it involves targeting gangs with wiretaps and using aerial surveillance to hone in on crime.
That's right.
As a former circuit court judge with extensive experience, of course, in criminal law, how do you think these new strategies will help fight Baltimore's crime problem?
I think they're very helpful, and I think you need to look back a little further. I was also a former federal prosecutor and also a defense attorney. Sometimes gangs are so closely held that it's difficult to invade into their goings-ons, to find out where things are happening. In many of our communities, people know that the gangs control a lot of what goes on in the neighborhood, and it's difficult to even drive down the street. You have people that you would think are just regular young people or kids riding bikes. Well, the gangs have provided those bikes, and they warn the police, so they can't even come into certain neighborhoods without the gangs controlling and notifying everyone. What he's talking about is using technology to assist in infiltrating these organizations so we can shut them down. And I think that's an excellent idea. I also sat on wiretaps, both as a prosecutor and as a judge, and I know that they are helpful in identifying those individuals who are actively involved in financing a lot of the gang activity. You know, there's a lot of money behind gangs and what they sell. And they don't just sell drugs now. They are involved in human trafficking. They are involved in crime, in breaking into homes, in selling property. So I do think his plan is viable and is actually the way to go. There are serious problems in Baltimore, and we need to address them.
And now, towards the tail end of what you said there, you talked about break-ins and crimes of that nature that could have connections to other larger crime syndicates. And Mr. Vigneraj's crime plan also involves and calls for referring all carjackings, all commercial robberies, and all felon in possession cases to the U.S. Attorney's Office. So from a judicial perspective, can you explain how that practice would help take criminals off the streets of Baltimore and make citizens of the city safer?
Just because you refer a case to the U.S. Attorney's Office does not mean they actually take it. What it all allows them to do is to track the criminal activity. Sometimes what appears to be low-level crime is part of a larger criminal enterprise. And in order to build a case to get to the top of that enterprise, you often have to work from the bottom. Again, I'm experienced in having done that as a federal prosecutor, and I'm fully aware of what he's talking about. It doesn't mean that all the cases go to the U.S. Attorney's Office and are prosecuted there, but it allows the U.S. Attorney's Office to identify whether these low-level crimes may be just the footmen that are involved in a larger criminal enterprise. And so there is nothing wrong with what he's suggesting, and it is a way of investigating these large organizations.
Thank you very much, Judge Hurd. Kai, back to you.
All right, Julian, thank you. Judge Hurd, thank you.